Hello, everyone, and welcome to CCTV America. I'm Asiye Namdar. The United Nations Security Council is meeting in New York tonight after Russia called for an urgent meeting on the escalating crisis in Ukraine. The call came as interim government in Kiev ordered an intervention against pro-Russian activists in eastern Ukraine who've in recent days taken control of government and police buildings. Ukrainian officials say they, quote, will not allow any repetition of the Crimea situation in the east of Ukraine. Nathan King joins us live in the newsroom with the latest. Nathan, what can we expect at the UN Security Council meeting tonight?
That's right, Asya. This meeting called by Russia after a weekend of fast-moving developments. We're told that this meeting will be held in open session now, not in closed session as proposed by the Russians. So that means Ukraine will be invited to attend, and it's going to happen in under 2 hours' time. Talking to my sources at the UN, Russia is expected to call for the protection of the Russian minority in eastern Ukraine and reserve their right to intervene on their behalf. This is probably the most important meeting of the UN Security Council since the Ukrainian crisis began, and we've had quite a few meetings. The situation in Crimea was very different. After all, it had long ties to Russia. There was a plebiscite and a largely orderly withdrawal of Ukrainian forces. And the situation in the east is different. Opinion polls really do differ as the feelings of the population in these provinces. And eastern Ukraine, as many of you know, is home to many of the natural resources that make Ukraine a viable state. And as you know, there are a large number of Russian forces on the border that Moscow says have been conducting exercises in the region. NATO and the US have been describing these actions as massing troops on the border and provocative. Also, this move by the Russian pro-elements in Ukraine and the threat of armed intervention by Kiev comes, remember, as the European Union, US and Russia and the Ukrainian interim government were preparing to sit down for talks in the coming week. Those planned talks now, of course, have an added urgency if they're going to go ahead at all.
Nathan, you mentioned this is the most important meeting at the UN on Ukraine since this crisis began. Why?
Yeah, well, the stakes have got a lot higher, haven't they? I think that after the Crimea referendum and officially deciding to join the Russian Federation, European and US diplomats had hoped that the situation would get better, that calmer negotiations on the future of the Ukraine could be held. In fact, the opposite has happened, hasn't it? And looking at the images coming in, as you see from eastern Ukraine, you still see a very divided country. Now, the West accuses Russia of fomenting the opposition, but whatever the reality of the situation, we have conditions for civil war on the ground in eastern Ukraine tonight. And if Russia acts on its, quote, right to intervene, to protect Russian speakers, we could be talking about a potential all-out war, not just civil war. And given strong statements from the US and NATO in recent days, we could see an escalation we have not seen since the end of the Cold War. So all eyes on the United Nations tonight here in the US.
All right, thank you so much. CCTV's Nathan King.